Think about what you did yesterday. Not the things you planned to do. Not the things you meant to do. What you actually did. How much of it mattered? How much of it was yours? Because here is the truth, that most people spend their entire lives carefully avoiding. You are not running out of energy. You are not running out of opportunity. You are running out of time. And the most devastating thing is not that time is passing. It is that you already know this, and you are doing it anyway. 2,000 years ago, a man who had more wealth, more power, and more comfort than almost anyone alive sat down and wrote something that should have changed everything. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." He was not writing to the poor. He was not writing to the suffering. He was writing to people exactly like you. People who had enough. People who had everything they needed to begin living, and who were choosing every single day not to. His name was Seneca, and what he discovered in the middle of a life that looked perfect from the outside is the one thing that will outlast everything you are currently busy with. Breathe, settle into this moment, and let us begin. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born around 4 BC in Cordoba, in what is now southern Spain. His father was a wealthy Roman scholar, a man of letters who moved his family to Rome when Seneca was still a child, determined that his son would have every advantage the greatest city in the world could offer, and Rome delivered. Young Seneca was educated by the finest philosophers available. He studied Stoicism, rhetoric, and natural science. He was sharp, ambitious, and hungry, in the way that brilliant young men always are when the world has told them they are gifted. But almost immediately, life began to test him. Seneca's health was fragile from childhood. He suffered from what historians believe was tuberculosis, a disease that made every breath feel borrowed and uncertain. There were years when he was so ill that he later wrote, "I often had the impulse to end my life. The thought that sustained me was the grief it would cause my father." Think about that. A young man lying in a room, uncertain whether he would see morning, already beginning to understand what most people only understand when it is far too late. That time is not promised. That breath is not given freely. That the life you are postponing may never arrive. He survived. He always survived. And every time he did, he carried the knowledge that most people spend their lives pretending they do not have. The knowledge that this moment is the only one he could be certain of. Seneca rose through Roman society with extraordinary speed. He became a celebrated orator, a sought-after philosopher, and one of the most recognized intellectual voices in Rome. And then the Emperor Caligula decided he wanted him dead, not for a crime, not for a betrayal, simply because Caligula could not tolerate the presence of a mind that outshone his own. Seneca was spared, barely, and only because one of Caligula's advisors convinced the emperor that Seneca was already dying. From his illness anyway, he had been saved from execution by his own fragility. Then Claudius became emperor, and Claudius exiled Seneca to the island of Corsica for 8 years. 8 years, far from Rome, from his career, from everything he had built. Most men would have broken. Most men would have spent those years in bitterness and grief, counting what had been taken, cursing the fortune that had placed them there. Seneca wrote, "On that island, stripped of everything the world called success, he produced some of the most important philosophical work in human history. And he discovered something that exile has taught every great mind that has ever been forced into it, that the busyness he had left behind was not living. It was the appearance of living. And in the silence of Corsica, with nothing to fill the hours but his own thoughts and his own words, he finally understood what he had been running from all along. How many times have you filled your hours with everything except the one thing that actually calls to you? How many times has the noise of being busy saved you from the silence of being honest?" Seneca heard that silence, and it changed everything he wrote. When Seneca returned to Rome, he carried the island with him, and over the years that followed, he wrote letters, essays, and reflections that together form one of the most urgent bodies of work ever produced by a human mind. Let me walk you through the heart of what he taught on the shortness of life. Seneca's most famous work begins with a sentence that lands like a hand on your shoulder. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. He was not saying life is long. He was saying that if you used the time you already have with full attention and true purpose, it would be more than enough. The problem is not the length. The problem is the leak. The hours given to things that do not matter to you. The years spent becoming the person someone else needed you to be. The decades spent preparing for a life you never quite began. Seneca wrote, Omnia lucili aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is alien to us, Lucilius. Time alone is ours. Not your reputation, not your possessions, not even your relationships, in the way you might think. Time, only time. And the question he spent his life asking was not how to get more of it. It was how to stop giving it away so freely to things that had never earned it. What are you giving your time to that has never once asked you whether you could afford it? On busyness, Seneca saw something in Rome that you will recognize immediately. People running, always busy, always occupied, always with somewhere to be, and something to finish, and someone who needed them, and never, not once, stopping to ask whether any of it was actually their life. He wrote, Busy yourself with nothing. Visit those of higher worth. Admit no one to your friendship, whom you would not be willing to die for. He called this the disease of busyness, the way modern people use activity as an escape from the one thing they cannot outrun. The question of whether the life they are building is the life they actually want. Are you busy because your life is full, or are you busy because the alternative is too quiet and too honest to sit with? On living for others, one of the most painful things Seneca ever wrote is this: You ask me why I avoid the company of the great, because I do not like to be continually reckoning up what I have lost. He understood that most people do not live their own lives. They live the lives that make other people comfortable. They pursue the goals that make other people proud. They measure themselves by standards that were handed to them before they were old enough to choose their own. And somewhere around 40 or 50 or 60, they look up from all of that and realize with a cold and quiet horror that they cannot remember the last time they did something purely because it was theirs. You still have time to choose differently. The question is whether you will wait until you do not. Here is what the statues of Seneca do not show you. He was not consistent. He was not perfectly wise. He was not the serene philosopher who had solved the problem of time and was patiently teaching others. He was a man wrestling with the exact same contradiction he spent his life writing about. He accumulated enormous wealth. While writing about the emptiness of wealth, he served emperors he despised. While writing about the courage of saying no, he spent years entangled in Roman politics. While writing about the freedom of stepping away from it, he knew this about himself. He did not hide from it. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, I am not yet the wise man. I shall never perhaps be one. Require me not to equal the best, only to be better than the worst. Not perfect, just better. Not arrived, just moving. And perhaps that is the most important thing Seneca ever admitted, that the person writing about wasted time was still, even in his final years, trying to waste less of it. That wisdom is not the destination. It is the direction. And every day you choose the direction, you are already living differently from the person who chose nothing at all. There is a Roman saying that Seneca himself might have written that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, but there is a suffering he never wrote about. The suffering of a life that had everything it needed to begin, and chose, every single day, not to. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He had every comfort, every convenience, every reason to feel that tomorrow would be soon enough, and he spent 40 years writing letters to a friend named Lucilius, trying to save him from exactly that. Those letters were not philosophy. They were urgency dressed in calm clothing. They were a man who had felt time running, trying to make someone else feel it too. Before it was too late, you have felt it too. In the quiet moments, between one distraction and the next, that small, honest voice that says this is not the life yet. This is the waiting room. Seneca would say that the waiting room is the most dangerous place you can live, because it feels safe, because nothing bad is happening, because you can always leave tomorrow, tonight, before anything else. Open something you can write in, not a plan, not a goal list. Just finish this sentence. The thing I have been waiting to begin is one sentence. Seneca spent his final hours dictating, still writing, still reaching, still refusing to let the time go unnamed. Give your time a name tonight. Subscribe to this channel and leave that one sentence in the comments, or just the first 3 words of it. That is enough to begin. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path.